Sivaya Nama, Tiruchitrambalam. Welcome to our series on a 360-degree view on ninth Tirumurai. Today, we are going to introduce a beautiful program which is Insights from Thiruvisaippaa. It's going to be a spiritual perspective in English. This is planned to be a continuous program, so at least by God's grace, we are hoping that this will happen on a monthly basis. But if He wants to increase the frequency, it's up to Him to do it. So we are open for it. So from today onwards, we are going to start with the insights from Thiruvisaippaa, which is also taken as the ninth Tirumurai when it comes to the 12 Tirumurais. Today's today's speaker is a very well-known speaker who has done a lot of talks, especially in Tamil. And he's also one of the management consultant, and he's also working as a visiting faculty. His qualification is mainly on engineering, and at the same time, he's also a MBA holder. He has a lot of spiritual experiences that he would love to share with us and especially guide youngsters in the path of spirituality. He takes it in a very real and at the same time more easy manner for all of us to relate with. He has a special devotion for Lord Muruga. So he is always moving on with Lord Muruga's devotion. And I guess Lord Muruga is the one who's guiding him as a guru as well, because you can see that kind of a devotion while he's talking. Without further ado, let me hand over to our beloved brother, Srinivasan Ayya. So let him continue his talk. Sivaya Nama.
Shivaya Nama, Tiruchitrambalam. It's a matter of great privilege and pleasure that I'm meeting all of you in this virtual forum to talk about Thiruvisaippaa. So, as you all know, Thiruvisaippaa is one of the 12 Tirumurais. This is the ninth Tirumurai. It's an anthology of verses of nine exalted yogic masters. And this virtual forum has been doing wonderful work in spreading the message of Thiruvisaippaa, in making people aware of this great literary and spiritual work. So my attempt here is to look at some few spiritual insights from Thiruvisaippaa verses. Thiruvisaippaa, as when she was introducing, she rightly said we need to have a 360-degree view because we can look at it from various dimensions. We can look at it from a literary perspective, we can look at it from a spiritual perspective, and so on. But today we are going to talk about what kind of spiritual insights we can get from these verses. And though it's the shortest Tirumurai, just about 300 verses, but very profound in meaning. Therefore, one needs to spend a lot of time to understand the beautiful truths enshrined in these verses. So we can take them one by one. And my plan today is to take up the first decade, so what we call as a Padiham, the Padiham which consists of 10 verses, we call it as a decade. And the first set of 10 verses is by Tirumaligai Thevar. And he's the first author in the Thiruvisaippaa anthology. And he has sung four Padihams, four decades, so totaling up to 45 verses. So very short, but in terms of meaning and in terms of the spiritual import, it's very profound. And nothing much is known about Tirumaligai Thevar. As we see with all great rishis and yogic masters, we don't know much about their background except some few glimpses of what they have done, the miracles that they have done, and so on. And even the name is very mysterious. So, how do we interpret Tirumaligai? Maligai is a mansion, a huge bungalow, and we don't know why he's called as Tirumaligai Thevar. So, but we can safely assume that he lived in the mansion of knowledge, Jnanam, and therefore that name is very apt for him. And he is a master who had attained a lot of yogic powers, very extraordinary powers, and therefore there are a lot of stories about him. And to the modern mind, they may seem exaggerated, but actually they are proof of the kind of power that this yogic master had over matter. So, and the physical matter was under his control, and his miracles were like, common, should have been a very routine activity for him. When there was a need, he did it. It's not that he planned to do it. So there is one particular verse which lists all the miracles that he did, and they are all nothing short of a miracle. So the verse goes like this. It says, "Kudambar விசும்பிடை நிறுவி குணபம் நடந்திட இயக்கி கொடிஞ்சிப் பொற்றேர் வடங்கடற்றி ஓட்டி மதில் நந்திகளை வரவழைத்து வரைநன் காட்டின் உடம்பின் எழு புகை மாற்றி கொங்கணர் பாத்திரம் சுவற்றி உணவதாய் வெந்திடும் பயறு முளை செய்து எமக்கு அருள் திருமாளிகை தேவர் இணைத்தாள் போற்று." I'm not going to go into the stories of these miracles, but it shows what kind of divine personality he was. It talks about how he once made a corpse walk on the roads, how he threw his puja articles, the vessel of water and flowers, and made them remain stationary in space, and how he brought down the rishabam or the nandis on the idols on the fortress wall of the temple. He brought them down and made them fight with the king's army, which came to imprison him, and so on and so forth. He made the smoke coming out of a cremation ground. He made it fragrant and things like this. So all these extraordinary acts are proof of the kind of divine realms in which he lived, and therefore this ordinary world of matter was, a kind of play for him. So as I said, he has sung four padigams or four decades, and each one in a different format. The first padigam is what we are going to take up today. The first decade of 10 verses is about the description of Lord Shiva. It's about the description and how we have to devote. And it's talking about his devotion. There is no direct advice actually to us, but it's actually talking about his devotion to Lord Shiva and how he sees Shiva. So that is a lot of important messages for us, and it's done in a very, from a literary perspective, it's so beautiful. Very beautiful verses to read aloud and sing. And that is the first set of 10 verses. The second set of 10 verses is the description of the physical form of the Lord. So what we call as the Padadikesha Varnai, which means describing the Lord from the feet to his crown. So this is a common tradition in both in Shaivite and Vaishnavite literature of describing the Lord's physical form, and how the devotee gets absorbed in the physical form of the Lord. Each and every organ of the Lord is something which reveals itself to the devotee and gives him a lot of pleasure, gives him or her a lot of pleasure and bliss. So the second decade is about is that kind of a description. And the third one, which starts with Uravagiya Yogam, is about the love a girl has towards Lord Nataraja and how her mother sees that love. And this is again a familiar format for people who study Tamil devotional literature, where the devotee assumes the form of a human lover expressing her love towards the Lord. So that is the third decade. And the fourth decade, it starts saying Inangila Isan, is something which talks about the power of satsang, the association with holy people and devotees. But here Tirumaligai Thevar actually takes a different stand, and he talks about how to dissociate oneself from the association of people who don't respect Lord Shiva or who don't have respect for Shiva's devotees. So, but in a sense, emphasizing the importance of satsang. So, from these four decades itself, we get an idea of the kind of the framework or the format or the matrix of Tirumaligai Thevar's compositions. The first one, which starts with saying Olivalar Vilake, that is a focus of attention for today's discussion and lecture. So it talks about Shiva as the shining light. So it starts with a very, and this, remember, and this is the first decade of entire Thiruvisaippaa. It sets the tone for Thiruvisaippaa's devotional offerings to the Lord. It is a very beautiful set of 10 verses, which many of the words remind us of Tiruvasakam and Devara. in several places. And as I said, this is not something which is in the form of an advice. There is no spiritual instruction. There is no direct advice, etc. It's only Tirumaligai Thevar addressing Lord Shiva and then talking about his experience. But in fact, the whole decade is about Tirumaligai Thevar expressing his inability to praise or to worship or to think about the Lord. So he is asking the Lord, saying, "Please make me think about you. Please make me worship you. Please make me talk about you. You have to enable me to do that. You have to be the facilitator for that." And so it's a complete absence of ego and beautiful sense of surrender. All that is evident in all the 10 verses. So for the great yogis, in the Yoga Sutra defines them as people who have tapas, swadhyaya, and ishvara pranidhana, meaning people who do a lot of penance. So they are characterized by tapas, which means a lot of intense penance and yogic, you know, rites and rituals, things like this. So there are a lot of tapas. And the second thing is swadhyaya, that is study of scriptures, so all the parayanam that we do, so intense study of scriptures and the pursuit of knowledge. And the third thing is Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to Ishvara, surrender to the Lord. So these are the three things which characterize a yogi. And we have seen that Tirumaligai Thevar is a great yogi from all the miracles that he did. So that he is a yogi like Tirumular in that tradition. And therefore, it is fit that in the very first decade that he is offering to the Lord, is actually talking about the sense of surrender. Every verse ends with saying, Tondanen Vilambuma Vilambe, Paniyuma Paniye, Isayuma Isaye, meaning, please allow me to do that. Please ensure that I am doing this. Please ensure that I am able to talk about you. Please ensure that I worship you. Please ensure that Ninayuma Ninaye, that means, please ensure that I am able to think about you, things like that. So with that, that itself is a big lesson for us, saying that where there is the real devotion comes where there is an absence of ego. And so I think that is the first indirect message, because directly he is not teaching us. But from the way Tirumaligai Thevar is composing these verses, we can get that spirit of surrender to the Lord and the absence of the ego. So the very first verse, the first words are very arresting. It starts by saying, Ulivalar Vilakke is the eternal shining lamp, and that light is spreading all the time. So that is a Ulivalar Vilakke, Ulappila Ondre, Unarvusul Kadandador Unarve. தெளிவளர் பளிங்கின் திரள்மணிக் குன்றே சித்தத்துள் தித்திக்கும் தேனே அழிவளர் உள்ளத்து ஆனந்தக் கனியே. So he starts addressing the Lord with multiple epithets, so various ways of describing him, and that is the pattern throughout these verses. So he describes the Lord, and then he says, I want to worship you. Please ensure that I am able to worship you. I want to praise you. Please ensure that I can praise you. So this is the format of all the 10 verses. And in these format, what we see is very beautiful description of Shiva. And this is the kind of description that we need, which will allow us to meditate. We want to meditate about the Lord. We don't know much about the Lord. So whenever we want to meditate on something, that we need to know about it. The object of knowledge, we should have some knowledge. And that's what we get from these spiritual verses. Like in this 10 verses, if you look at collectively all the epithets Tirumaligai Thevar uses, the way he addresses the Lord, the way he invokes him, gives us a lot of clues as to how we should see the Lord, what kind of perspective we should have, how we can think about him, how we can contemplate on him, and how we can meditate on him. So, for example, in this first verse, he says, he addresses the Lord as Olivalar Vilakku, ever shining light, Ulappila Ondru, one that is never destroyed, the permanent, the ever shining one, Unarvu Sool Kadandador Unarve. He is the principle of intelligence and awareness, but which is all beyond all the limitations of human intelligence and awareness. Thelivalar Padingin Thiral Manik Kundre. He is like a mountain of a coral mountain spreading light. Chittatul Tittikum Tene, a nectar which is so sweet that it is within our own chittam or within our own mind and consciousness, and there it is full of sweetness. Again, he emphasized the point saying, Alivalar ullattu ananda kaniye, inside the heart, inside our mind, and it is like the fruit of bliss. So if you look at these, put together all these descriptions, you will find that actually we are seeing what we call as the Satchit Ananda description of the Lord. Because in the Vedas and the Upanishads, but in all our Shaivite scriptures also, God's nature is described as the combination of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. And Sat refers to the eternal reality, Chit refers to the principle of intelligence and awareness, and Ananda refers to bliss. And we say that our tradition says that that's the nature of Lord. And that's why we see him as Soma Skandar. That is when Lord Shiva appears with Parvati or Uma Devi with Skandar, Murugan in between them as a small kid. It is representing the Sachitananda Swarupa. So where he is Sat and Ambal represents Chit and Murugan represents bliss. So that is the eternal nature of the Lord. And this is what Thirumalgai Devar is actually describing here. Because when he says Olivalar Vilakku, Ulappila Ondru, he is referring to the Sat aspect of Shiva. And when he says Unarvu Sool Kadandador Unarvu, Telivalar Palingin Thiradmani Kundru, is referring to the Chit or the intelligence and awareness aspect. And finally, when he says Chittatul Tittikum Tain, Alivalar Ullattu Ananda Kani, when he uses those words of sweetness and bliss, he is obviously referring to the third dimension of that Swarupam of nature of the Lord, which is bliss. So he says, so he describes the way Thirumalagaitevar describes the Lord himself, gives us an idea of how we need to understand Lord and how we need to meditate on him. So continuing in the second verse, he is again talking about the light of the Lord. So throughout in these 10 verses, we see repeated references to Lord Shiva as the light. And in that way, it reminds us of one of the famous padihams in Tiruvasakam. It starts with Sodiye, Sudare, Soul, Voli, Vilakke, where there are repeated references to Shiva as the light in every verse. So this is somewhat similar to that. In the second verse is again talking about the form of light of Shiva, which is spreading in all directions and removing the darkness and removing all the miseries and troubles associated with darkness. He says, இடர்கெடுத்து என்னை ஆண்டு கொண்டு என்னுள் இருட்பிழம்பு அற எரிந்து எழுந்த சுடர் மணி விளக்கின் உள்ளொளி விளங்கும் தூய நற்சோதியுள் சோதி. So several words relating to light. We say சுடர்மணி விளக்கு, உள்ளே உள் ஒளி, ஜோதியுள் ஜோதி. So several words are used to emphasize that light aspect of the Lord. And then finally he even says, again when he calls the Lord, he says, Ayanodu Malariamai Padaroli Parappi Parandu Nindraye. He is referring to that story which everyone knows associated with Tiruvannamalai, where the Lord stood as a pillar of light, and both Vishnu and Brahma were not able to see the bottom and the top of that infinite pillar of light that appeared before them. So as I said in the second verse, the light, seeing Shiva as light is emphasized here. So again, a great hint to all the people who want to meditate on the Lord, that you can meditate on him as the eternal light within your own heart. And emphasizing that in this second verse, Thirumalagaitevar talks about Ulloli Vilangum Tuya Natchodiyul Jyoti. Ulloli, when he says Ulloli, that means the light which is within. He is referring to the light of our own self that shines within. And he says that is the Jyotiyul Jyoti, which means that the light of all lights or the light behind the light. And that purifies us, and therefore he says Tuya Natchodiyul Jyoti. So this is the second verse. And in the third verse, the same tone, Thirumalagaitevar continues, is talking about how the Lord makes you think. Therefore he says, I want to think about you, I want to meditate on you, but you will have to ensure that you will have to think that first I have to think. So something similar to what Manikavasagar says in the very first, in the opening song in Tiruvasakam, where he says, Avanarulale Avantal Vanangi. That is worshipping the Lord with His grace. Therefore, it is His grace which allows us to worship Him. And in that perspective, here, Tirumalagai Tevar says, Tondanen Karuduma Karude. I want to meditate on you, but you will have to think. You will have to first ensure that that happens. So, in this third verse, again, various ways of describing the Lord. He says, Tarparam Purule, Sashi Kanda Shikanda, Samakanda, Andavana, Narperum Purulai, Urai Kalandu, Unnai, Ennudai, Navinal, Navilvan, Arpan என் உள்ளத்து அளவிலா உன்னை தந்த பொன் அம்பலத்து அரசே. So again, all these various descriptions are basically um, talking about Shiva as the permanent, eternal, underlying reality. So when he says Tarparam Purul, which means the supreme being, which is ever existing and which is the fundamental state of awareness. So he addresses the Lord like this, and then in a state of utter humility, he says, Arpan என் உள்ளத்து அளவிலா உன்னை தந்த பொன்னம்பலத்து அரசே. And this is the state of all these exalted yogic masters, that they reduce themselves to you know, like a dust particle, as Manikavaskar calls himself. And so he's reduced himself to a state of zero or nothingness. And he says, Arpan, I'm a very ordinary, limited, and worthless mortal. And in my mind, you came and entered and gave yourself to me. Arpan என் உள்ளத்து அளவிலா உன்னை தந்த பொன்னம்பலத்து அரசே. And we'll have to see that in the context of what kind of miracles Tirumalagai Tevar did and what a charmed life he was leading as a person with a lot of yogic powers. But he sees himself as someone who is so limited and mortal, and it's a Lord who blessed him and gave him all the happiness. And then he continues in the same tone. So we are coming to the fourth verse. And here he talks about the diversity that we see in the world. He says all the diversity gets resolved into that one. And therefore he says, Perumayil Shirumai Pennodu Adai and Pirappu Irappu Arutha Peroliye. Seeing the Lord as everything which is so exalted and everything which is so mundane, and as human beings, as both man and woman, and Urumayir Palabukku Uruvin Endraye. And we see the one behind the many. So today we talk about unity in diversity. So the Lord has actually showing that all the time, that He is one behind the many. And therefore He says, Urumayir Palabukku Uruvin Endraye Tondanen Uraikumaru Uraye. So how can we talk about someone who is exhibiting this kind of diversity? So it's very difficult for the ordinary mind to see the unity behind all the diversity. And therefore, in this verse, Tirumalagai Tevar is drawing our attention to the fact that we can see God in all the dualities and in all the diversity that we see. So moving on to the fifth verse. So here again is continuing his description. Kolame, Melai Vanavar Kove, Gunam Kuri, Irandador Guname. But there is constant debate in philosophical literature as to whether God should be seen as one with attributes or without attributes. So there is a lot of debate in between many religions and philosophies. But our Shaivism has very clearly said both uh, having attributes and not having attributes are equally kind of equally present in the Lord. And therefore, we have to see even not having an attribute itself can be seen as an attribute of the Lord. That He is beyond all that. And therefore, in this verse, Tirumalagai Tevar says, Gunam Kuri Irandador Guname. That is, He has transcended all the qualities and symbols and things like this. So, if He had stopped like that, then we have to assume that God is completely without attribute or form. But He ends that word by saying, Gunam Kuri Irandador Guname, that attribute of God, which ensures that He has transcended all the attributes. That means all that is resolved within the Lord. And it is absolutely, from a spiritual perspective, from a philosophical perspective, it's okay to say that the Lord is beyond all, symbols and things like this. And it's also acceptable to see God having all the symbols like Gangai Nayaka, Engal, Kalakala, Kamanasa. So he starts, in fact, later on in other verse, he's going to talk about Shiva as the father of Vinayaka, father of Muruga. So we can see him with all these attributes, we can see him with all this form, but at the same time, we have to appreciate that he is beyond all these attributes. So in this verse, this fifth verse, Tirumalaketevar ends by saying, Nalame Tamiyen Natravattaye Tondanen Nanuguman Nanuge. So when we talk about God in such paradoxical terms, the doubt that will come to our mind, how can we approach someone where there seems to be so much paradox? And therefore here for us, uh, Tirumalaketevar is praying, please ensure that I am able to approach you, and you will have to approach me so that I can approach you. So Tondane Nanuguma Nanuge. So that is the word that he uses. When we move to the sixth verse, நீரணி பவளக்குன்றமே நின்ற நெற்றிக்கண் உடையதோர் நெருப்பே வேரணி புவன போகமே யோக வெள்ளமே. Again, he is talking about two contradictory things. So, where he says, Lord Shiva is in the form of all the bliss that we experience in this world. Verani Bhuvana Bhogam means in this world, the kind of pleasures that we see in the world, there is no limit to it. There is enormous amount of diversity. So people are continuously running after various kinds of pleasures and various kinds of, some according to righteous, some can be even not bound by the rules of righteousness. But the fact is that in this world, people are running after many pleasures. And so all that pleasures is actually Lord Shiva himself. So he says, Verani Bhuvana Yogami. And then he says, Yoga Vellame, meaning that he is also the pleasure that comes or the bliss that comes out of yoga. So Bhogam and Yogam, we see as two opposite things. That yoga is one where it takes you away from the world and it's a kind of interior pleasure, bliss that you enjoy. Whereas Bhogam is the kind of pleasures that you enjoy in the material world. And here we see the resolution of both in Lord Shiva, and Tirumalaketevar talks about that saying, Verani Bhuvana Bhogame Yoga Vellame Meruvil Veera Arani Shadayam Arpuda Putta Ambanshe Ambalattarase. And all these 10 verses are actually addressed to Lord Nataraja in Chidambaram. So every verse is actually talking about the dance of Lord Shiva and seeing Lord Shiva as Nataraja. Unnai Tundanen Isayumari Isay. How can we talk about someone who's again resolving, one in whom all these opposites are getting resolved? So the Lord has to give us the power to talk about him. Therefore, here Tirumalaketevar says, Tundanen Isayumari Isay. And in the seventh verse, we see the Lord Shiva as having a lot of, we can see him as a person where he has a friend and he has his own sons. And, we see him entirely as an individual, as a person. And he says, so this verse says, Tanadannal Tora, Shankara, Shula Paniye, Tanuve, Shivane, Kanahanal Tune, Karpahak Kodinde, Kangal Mundru, Udayador Karumbe. We see all the symbols and all the associated with Lord Shiva here, that he is the friend of Kubera, the Lord of Wealth, and he is the one who is holding the trident. He is having three eyes in his forehead. And Kumara Vinayaka Sanaka Ambalattu Amarasekarane, and he is the father of both Lord Ganesha and Lord Muruga. Una Kadal Inai in Nenjinul Inida Tondanen Nuharuma Nuhare. So I want to enjoy you. I want to enjoy the thought of you in my heart. And please ensure that I am able to do it. So it's from a spiritual perspective, from a yogic perspective, it is okay to see the Lord as pure light, where he is not conditioned by any form and things like this. And it's also okay to see him as uh, Lord Shiva with all his rich imagery and symbols that we see associated with him. And we see him as the father of Lord Ganesha and Lord Muruga. Then we move to the next verse, which is the eighth verse. It is very impressive. Because here what we see, typically we get caught in a lot of fights with many philosophical divisions and various religious divides and things like this. Shaivism has the maturity to accept that even this discordant or the other kind of religious beliefs, even that is created by the Lord. So we don't discredit them by saying, only what Shaiva Siddhantam only was created by Lord Shiva. All the others or because of demon and things like that. That's how some of the other religions talk about. They say only their religion is pure, and all the other parts are actually uh, kind of demonic and things like this. So that attitude we don't see here. So here Tirumalikai Devar says in the 8th verse, "திரம்பிய பிறவிச் சில தெய்வ நெறிக்கே திகைக்கின்றேன் தனைத் திகையாமே நிறம் பொன்னும் மின்னும் நிறைந்த சேவடிக்கீழ் நிகழ்வித்த நிகரிலாமணியே." That I was lost in all these various, there is various ways to pursue God, there is various ways to understand the truth. So I got confused, and you came and you ensured that I got the clarity and I was able to see and attain your divine feet. And that's how he describes. And then he says, Arampala Tirankandu Arundavarku Arasai, all in Kid Ambalava. So though he is talking about Nataraja in every verse, in this particular verse, he is talking about the Lord as Dakshinamurti, as the great teacher who sat under the banyan tree and he taught the inner meaning of all the scriptures to the rishis. So that is the aspect of Lord Shiva, which is like kind of very dear to all his devotees when they want to pursue the path of knowledge. So Lord Dakshinamurti, he invokes Lord Dakshinamurti, and then he says, Puram Shaman Buddhar Poigal Kandayai Tondanin Punaruma Punare. And this is the most beautiful word in this verse, where he says both Buddhism and Jainism, which has been against the principles of Shaivism for a long time. And we all read in our history that there has been a great clash between these two religions with Shaivism. And here, see the maturity of spiritual maturity and the exalted perspective. And he says both Buddhism and Jainism, all the untruths, and the untruths were created by you. And he's saying, though he says they are all different than the truths of what Shaiva Siddhantam says, they are other than they are untruths, but even that was created by you. So he is seeing them with compassion. And he says it's the same Lord Shiva who created those other ways of thinking. Puram Shaman Buddhar Poigal Kandai Tonden Tondanen Punaruma Punare. In fact, this is exactly what Tirigana Sambandar said, because in our history we study that Tirigana Sambandar was instrumental in Jainism getting driven out of Tamil Nadu. And there, in one of the Devaram, ஞானசம்பந்தர் says, இணையில் இரும்பூளை இடங்கொண்ட ஈசன் அணைவில் சமண சாக்கியம் ஆக்கியவாறே. That Lord Shiva created Jainism and Buddhism. What kind of exalted perspective that these people are having. And then 9th and the 10th verse. The 9th and the 10th verses are about the way Shiva destroyed, but through the destruction actually blessed Dakshan and Ravana. So both these, there is the story of Daksha Yagam is well known to all Shiva devotees. That Dakshan was a king who's become so egoistic that he thought he can do a great sacrifice, ignore Lord Shiva, and then Lord Shiva sends Veerabhadra to go and destroy that yajna, destroy that Vedic sacrifice, and teach a lesson to Daksha. Daksha gets punished, and all the celestial beings who went to that sacrificial ritual got punished. Therefore, the ego of Daksha, the king Daksha, got crushed in that process. And similarly, Ravana is another personification of ego. He thought he can shake Mount Kailash, and he got punished by the Lord. So these two stories are referred to in verses 9 and 9 and 10. And then Tirumalikai Devar says, அடங்க வல்லரக்கன் அருட்திரு வரைக்கீழ் அடர்த்த பொன்னம்பலத்து அரசே விடங்கொள் கண்டத்து எம் விடங்கனே உன்னை தொண்டனேன் விரும்புமா விரும்பே. That is, I want to, this is a very beautiful way he ends this decade. He says, I want to like you, I want to love you, but ensure that you love me so that I can love you. Tondaneen virumbuma virumbe. That's a very beautiful attitude of the devotee, saying that even my love to you has to be blessed by you. Ensure that you love me so that I can love you back. So with that, he ends his verses. And then, as I said, it's full of surrender and the meekness of a humble devotee. He ends in the 11th verse of this particular decade. He says, மறைகளும் அமரர் கூட்டமும் மாட்டாது அயன்திருமாலொடு மயங்கி முறைமுறை முறையிட்டு ஓர்வரியாயை முர்கனேன் மொழிந்த புன்மொழிகள். So he says the entire scriptures and all the celestial beings and Mahavishnu and Brahma, all these people are not able to really understand you and talk about you. And therefore, I had just tried to say a little bit about you. And அரைகடல் அரஞ்சீர் அறிவிலா வெறுமை சிறுமையில் பொறுக்கும். Whatever I said is out of my own limited knowledge or even ignorance. And from that petty state, I have talked about you, who cannot be described in the Vedas, who cannot be described by all the celestial beings. And therefore, you have to forgive me for that. And Niraitharu Karuna Nilayame Unnai Tondanen Ninayuma Ninaye. Finally, he ends by saying, please ensure that I am thinking about you all the time. And you will have to think so that I think about you. So that's how he ends. And when I read these 10 verses, I mean, I'm just reminded of what one great spiritual master said. In very ordinary people, they say a little bit of a brain wave or a little flash of an inspiration creates a big commotion in their minds. They may go and give several lectures and they may write hundreds of pages and thousands of pages and hundreds of books. But in great minds, they say in the exalted masters, um, so there will be great ideas and great inspirations coming, but they are not moved by it, and they still remain in their own humble state. And he gives the comparison saying, in a small fish bowl, the fishes can jump around and create a lot of commotion in that fish bowl. But in the vast ocean, a lot of whales jump about, but the ocean is not disturbed. And so the minds of all these masters are like that. And so there's an example that we see here in Thiruvisaippaa, the first decade, where Tirumaligai Tevar, who has the vision of Lord Shiva, he's talking about him as the eternal light. He's able to see that light and he's talking about it. But at the same time, he takes an attitude of complete self surrender and humility. And he says, all that I have described him is from my own limited knowledge or from my own ignorance. And he has to really forgive me for that. And all I am asking the Lord is that he should make me think about him. He should make me worship him. He should make me praise him, and he should make me meditate on him, and he should make me love him. So the real message of this Thiruvisaippaa starts in that beautiful devotion. So it's a happy blend of devotion and knowledge that we see, and that is characteristic of the entire Thiruvisaippaa. We see that really highlighted in a very beautiful manner in this first decade that Tirumaligai Tevar composed. So we will continue to see more of such germs in this series of lectures. So I invite all of you to spend time to do your own reading and deep study of these 10 verses of Tirumaligai Tevar. As I said, one of the foundations of yoga is Swadhyayam, repeated intense study of the scriptures. And this is one such decade that is actually fit for a lot of Swadhyaya almost on a daily basis. So thanks for patiently listening to me. Shivaya Nama, Tiruchitrambalam.